Welcome to the HGST Channel Marketing Webinar, Optimizing Data Center Performance with HGST Storage. Today, you will uncover how to distinguish yourself from your competition and develop new revenue streams. You will learn about the rise of MLC, the evolution of high and mainstream read and write endurance, the endurance points people should know, how TCO impacts the balance between performance and cost, the latest of 3-bit for read-intense applications like video, and the shift from today's preference for fiber channel in SATA and PCIe and SAS. Just a few housekeeping notes to begin. As you entered the WebEx console, you will notice that this event is being streamed through your computer speakers via the WebEx Media Player. Please keep the WebEx Media Player open at all times. If you had to join via the teleconference, please note that your phone lines were automatically muted and they will remain this way throughout the webcast. We will be using written Q&A during today's event. To ask a question at any time, please enter your question in the WebEx Q&A panel as you think of them. You can find the Q&A panel at the bottom right hand of the console. If you are in full screen mode, it will be located at the top of the screen to the far right. Click on the arrow and select Q&A from the drop-down menu. Please leave the WebEx chat window for communication to our WebEx facilitators for problems or issues you may be experiencing. Again, please enter your questions for our speakers in the WebEx Q&A panel. Today's program is being recorded and will be available for viewing. At the end of the session, there will be a short survey that will pop up when you close your browser. If you could please take a minute to complete the survey, we would greatly appreciate it. At this time, I would like to introduce Mitch Abbey. Mitchell, I will turn the program over to you.
Good morning. As I begin my discussion on performance in the data center, I'll touch on a number of areas: the market, the interfaces, the segments and the performance levels, the shift from SLC to MLC, and discuss performance, endurance, and trade-offs to cost. SATA has been the dominant interface going forward, and as we believe that SAS and PCIe will replace SATA through better performance and a more robust command set in a number of applications. And the idea that SSDs will replace HDDs is simply not true. SSDs and HDDs work together to make the best overall solution for our customers. It's also key to understand that it takes 3 parts to make a well-balanced, high-performing SSD: the interface, the controller, and the NAND. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So what's driving the need for high-performance applications like big data, cloud computing, data mining? They require a better mix of solid-state and hard drives. It's clear that over the last decade, storage I/O has not kept pace with the other system components like CPU, main memory, and the system bus. Thus, the need for SSDs that deliver higher random IOPS than hard drives, both in terms of throughput and access latencies. While SSDs can close the I/O gap and deliver the needed performance for hot data, there's still the cost issue, and HDDs offer the best dollars per gigabyte. So with the 80-20 rule, 20% of the data being hot and 80% cold, using tiering gives you the best overall performance. As you can see, different applications require different levels of performance and capacity. Data center planners will select a combination of storage devices to balance performance, capacity, and cost. And enterprise tiering are really split into 3 main building blocks: SSDs, 10K and 15K high-performance HDDs, 7200 or lower high-capacity HDDs. And the performance versus price trade-off is pretty clear. In addition, secondary matrices should be considered when selecting storage devices, which include things like reliability, power, and even space efficiency as well. It's also important to note that tiering across multiple device types don't necessarily have to happen inside the same system or even in the same location. A solution can exist with a solid-state-based storage system that's combined with a hard drive-based off-site storage service, as proposed in many hybrid cloud architectures. So if we overlay typical applications, we see they map to a variety of performance and capacity levels, ranging from cloud storage, content gaming, to analytics and front-end web surfing. In the cloud, where scale makes cost even more critical than traditional IT, use storage tiering to optimize the cost. As you can see, depending on the performance and the capacity needs, solid state or hard drives, or a combination of both are needed to gain the best overall performance solution for the given application. Another factor to consider, in addition to performance, is the endurance of SSDs. The endurance of a NAND component is specified by the number of program erase cycles, or PE cycles, under certain specifications and test conditions. You can find these test conditions in the JEDEC standards. And the different lithography of NAND and the factory optimizations create the various endurance levels, some of which include trimming, adjusting the settings, sorting, and binning. And typical PE specs for a 30 or 20x nanometer are SLC at 100 to 200K PE cycles, eMLC or enterprise class MLC at 10 to 30K PE cycles, your standard compute grade MLC, which ranges from 2K to 5K, and 3 bits per cell NAND of roughly 200 to 500 PE cycles. But moving from the NAND component endurance to SSD endurance, we need to look at drive writes per day, which is the number of total times the drive can be written to per day for a number of years. So in the case of HGST's MLC drive, with 10 drive writes per day, a 400 gig capacity with a warranty of 5 years, that's 10 times a day writing 400 gig for 5 years, or 400 times 10 times 365 times 5 gives you 3.7 petabytes of life of that drive. And the conditions vary by vendor, but for HGST's SSDs, we spell out some of the worst case limits when we look at endurance metrics. Things like random workload with full volume uniformity distributed across the drive, 100% full drive writes, not fresh out of the box, completely random, so no compression, at end-of-life retention of 3 months after power off at 40 degrees C storage temp, and an Uber support of 10 to the minus 16th. And with performance degradation at the end of the rated life at less than 10%. So in other words, the drive's performance is very consistent over the life of the drive. Over the last year, we have seen a shift away from SLC towards MLC in the enterprise market. Controllers have improved, and customers have redefined their workload requirements along with the needs to drive lower costs, making MLC the preferred NAND. In addition, MLC is also segmenting into 3 areas: high endurance, mainstream, and read intense. For high endurance, the need is between 25 to 30 drive writes per day. For mainstream, the need is about 10 drive writes per day. And for read intense, it's around 1 to 3 drive writes per day. With regards to the 3 bits per cell TLC, as you saw on the last slide, the endurance level is far below even the compute grade NAND. And I don't believe we will see 3-bit in the enterprise read-intense applications anytime soon. It will be used in more consumer-type applications first, where write once and read many times is required. It also will be interesting to see, as lithographies continue to shrink, whether MLC can maintain its endurance with the improvements in controllers, or whether SLC could be needed again in the future for enterprise applications. As I touched on in an earlier slide, SSDs are made up of three main parts: the interface, the controller, and the NAND. The controller is made up with the interface, which is critical for system integration and scaling, and holds the full suite of enterprise requirements, including error recovery, needed reliability, as well as the NAND management. NAND still makes up the majority of the SSD cost, and as the lithographies decrease to improve the cost, the controller needs to increase in order to maintain and improve the overall reliability of the SSD. This table summarizes three interface options: SATA, SAS, and PCIe. Depending on the enterprise storage system, many factors must be considered in choosing the best interface for the job. The speed of the interface, for SATA, 6 gig, or for SAS, 6 gig or 12 gig, and for PCIe, Gen 2 or Gen 3. For interface configurations, single port for SATA, dual or multi-port for SAS, and PCIe, how many lanes depending on the performance needs. 2 lanes for read-intense applications, 4 or more when you start going for high endurance and high performance. And performance and power, there's a trade-off. The more power, the higher the performance, but it comes with, the cost of higher power. SATA and SAS are well-established standards. While PCI is emerging as a drive interface that currently is transitioning from proprietary solutions to standardization, with several standards efforts underway. As you know, 2 major initiatives are being proposed using PCIe in the enterprise applications: SCSI Express, or SAS over PCIe, SOP, and NVMe. Both have a lot in common. But SCSI Express is targeted more towards storage-based systems, and NVMe is targeted more towards server-based applications. It would be great to see these 2 initiatives merge in the future as NVMe continues to add more SCSI features. Looking a little closer at Hitachi's SLC and MLC products, you see they both support dual 6 gig SAS. Both use the lowest enterprise lithography today, which is 25 nanometer, with capacities up to 400 gig at a 2.5-inch form factor. From a performance standpoint, you see the performance is very close, especially in the IOPS. This is to support the transition from SLC to MLC to ease customers' migration to MLC. Endurance, SLC is much higher than MLC by an order of about 5 times from a PE cycle standpoint. And for applications with security concerns, we support TCG for encryption. And today, Hitachi is the market leader in SAS and fiber channel, with roughly 40% share of market in the enterprise market. And looking to the future, 12 gig SAS standard is close to completion. It doubles the current performance of 6 gig. With power controls, systems can decide the power level. With higher power comes better performance if the system can use it. Atomic writes ensures that operations are completed in their entirety or not at all. As such, when atomic writes are used, applications don't have to take the extra steps to protect their data against partial writes during failures. And the passing of hints can improve performance, and the extended opens reduces latency in direct attached devices. And last, what I think is critical, is 12 gig SAS discussions are underway to continue to drive interface performance in the future for enterprise systems. Multifunction SAS and PCIe Bay is a very flexible connector and is critical for next generation systems. It supports up to 25 watts of power, which increases the performance. It adjusts so the system can decide the trade-off between power and performance. It supports hot swap and 2-fault domains, and is flexible in supporting a wide range of devices from 12 gig SAS, multi-link SAS, PCIe, whether it's NVMe, SOP, or current proprietary solutions, SATA Express, and 6 gig SATA and SAS. The system bottleneck in the past was from storage. And with enterprise solid state, this is changing. SSDs can and do saturate a 6 gig interconnect. With the new higher performing SAS and PCIe, it will be some time before a single SSD will saturate the I/O. From a system standpoint, dual port 12 gig links or 4 lanes of PCIe expand the performance envelope even more, with nothing to say of systems with more things such as multi-link or even 8 lanes of PCIe. But selecting the most appropriate interface for a given enterprise system or application is a multifaceted decision. However, some attributes in the interface make it a better fit for certain types of systems and applications. For example, SATA and PCIe fall short in the reliability and scalability features, making SAS a better choice for external storage systems as well as mission-critical servers. But in applications like blade and commodity servers, where redundancy is often implemented at the system level, the choice is a bit more open, with PCIe taking the performance leadership, SATA on the price leadership, and SAS providing a very well-balanced option. So in summary, enterprise SSDs and performance HDDs will continue to be complementary. The market will shift from SATA to SAS and PCIe. SLC is shifting to MLC in many enterprise applications. The system bottleneck is no longer with the interface I/O, and compatibility and interoperability are key in driving SSD adoption. Thank you. Now I'll open it up for any questions.
Just a reminder, if you do have questions, please enter them in the Q&A panel as you think of them. It looks like we do have a few questions that have come in already. So let's see. Where can I get more information about your solid-state drives for my customers?
A couple of different places. One, from our website, where we have all of various data sheets, app notes, some of the comparisons from competitors, as well as some of the podcasts. In addition, there'll be more information coming out following this presentation.
Okay. Can you explain high-endurance SSD price trends?
Yeah, for the most part, from an enterprise standpoint, the pricing does continue to come down, but it's a trade-off between the various applications from the standpoint of whether you're looking for high endurance or mainstream or read intense. You'll see a difference from a dollars per gigabyte standpoint, but the trend will continue to go down as lithographies move from one to the other. That's usually when you'll see your biggest price changes that take place as customers move from one lithography to the next.
Okay. Can you explain the competitive landscape in terms of competitors and solutions?
Yeah, that's a pretty broad question. Today, there are a number of, in the enterprise space, there's probably at least 10 or 12 competitors that claim to be in the enterprise market. And they vary between the various interfaces, whether it's SATA-based, SAS, or PCIe. And you kind of see distinguishes between each one of those interfaces who those key competitors are. And so the trends there will continue to see a lot of people entering this market, trying to go after this market space because it is a growing market, and we see storage continuing to grow as we move forward. But I think that as we continue on, you're going to find there's a variation between how well our competitors support our customers and have the ability from a service and support standpoint to actually support our enterprise in the styles that they're used to seeing in the hard drive world.
Is there a board that plugs into the PCIe slot with cables going to the SSD, and do you have this kit?
Yes, there are kits out there. No, we don't actually support those. Most of our customers that we deal with in the data center have the various linkages. Now, it depends on what directions you're going to be doing, whether you're front loading. For the most part, then you just plug directly in. But if you're coming from the back and directly into the PCIe, you can get cables that allow you to plug into various SAS and SATA drives.
Okay. How is the availability of the enterprise level SSD from SSD form HGST? And it's supposed to be SSD, he just said. Sorry.
Okay, so the question is the availability. Both of our SLC and MLC products are in full production today. So it's just an issue of placing the order and how fast that we can turn that. But generally, you should see no more than a 4 to 6 week lead time. And occasionally as things happen, if you have to go all the way back to wafer fab, then lead times stretch. But for the most part, we should be seeing pretty consistent supply. So we don't see and haven't seen any issues with support from a demand standpoint.
Okay. Someone said, need to plug in the SSD drives to this card that plugs into the PCIe slot, so that it is a secondary market item.
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have an SSD price capacity projection over the next couple of years?
There are, generally I think you're going to continue to see the prices come down probably anywhere from 2 to 5%, but it really depends on the application. When you start looking at the price projections, and it really falls into what's the lithography, what's the volumes that you're going to be driving. So it's not easy to just say that, is price going to continue to fall? Now, if you look at NAND, you have been seeing somewhere around a 30% fall in NAND, but that's really starting to look more from a consumer-grade NAND. But when you put that into enterprise applications, it's not quite the same level from an endurance and capacity standpoint of what you need to have from over-provisioning and controllers that you need to have. So, you're still going to see the prices continue to fall as the volumes continue to go up. If volume projections hold from what analysts are saying, and you're going to see the TAM double again this coming calendar year, you would expect to see, a 5 to 10% price reduction.
Okay. What is the TCO comparison between SLC and MLC over a 5+ year period?
There it depends on the application again. If you've got an application where it's high write applications, you're probably going to want to stick with SLC because you get a much longer endurance. For example, if you look at our MLC 400 gig, we have about 7.3 petabytes of life in the drive, which equates to about 10 drive writes per day. But if you look at our SLC product in a 400 gig, there you're talking about 35 petabytes of life, or being able to write over 100,000 PE cycles. So you're looking at a 50-plus drive write per day comparison. So when you're looking at total cost of ownership, a lot then plays into the difference between what is the application in terms of how often am I going to be writing to that application. Is it a 70-30, 20-40, 60-40 type of thing versus a very high write where you may be 80 or 90% of drive writes? Then you're going to want to stick with SLC. Now, granted, SLC is probably at least an order of magnitude higher from a price standpoint than MLC, and that's why people are trying to move more towards MLC. So then you have to start looking at what's the cost trade-off between how long of my drive write versus the cost of that drive to determine whether or not MLC is a better fit over SLC.
There is not really an industry standard for SSD smart data or SSD mode pages. Is the HGST working with other vendors to standardize SSD data?
I think you're correct that there's not a lot of standards today in the industry, and that is one of the big issues, especially when you start looking at picking a device for your various applications from vendor to vendor, because not all data sheets are created equal, and you really have to understand in your specific application how that drive reacts. But in terms of smart commands, they're getting to be a lot more standardized in terms of what you can get out of those smart commands. Things like how the gas gauge works, you know, your G lists, all of those different types of things. Most of that is now starting to be standardized. And yes, you know, that's one of the things that some of the standards bodies are talking about, is to try and get more standardization into the market as we move forward.
Okay. You've made mention of a switch towards the SSD from the standard SATA drives. With Western Digital releasing a 4 TB drive, when do you foresee the SSD sizes catching up?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you're looking at PCIe, for example, where you have a card, so you're not bound necessarily by a 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch form factor, there we're seeing already drives coming into the 3 terabyte type range. But in the 2.5-inch form factor, due to the lithography of where we're at today at 25 nanometer, you know, you're pushing up against a terabyte is probably about the most of the capacity that you're going to see. You get a little bit higher in a 3.5-inch, but then you have to trade off the difference between what that application is to the hard drive in terms of how many HDDs to SSDs do you need to have to get the best overall performance when you start looking at your tiering type applications. Now we do see, you know, full SSD systems out there today that have been complemented, you know, like I talked about earlier in a hybrid cloud application that has a 100% SSD system, and then it backs up from the cold data to an HDD service provider. But you're still going to continue to see variations where right now we're still seeing most of the demand for SSDs under 300 gigabytes as an average. And that will continue to go up, and we've been seeing that go up by about 15 to 20% annually. So eventually, yes, we're going to see much higher capacities for SSDs, but it's a cost trade-off.
All right, and it looks like we have one last question. Is warranty on the SSD 5 years, or is it based on usage?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. Our warranty is 5 years, or the user writes capability. So if you go in and you're very high in your write application on an MLC device and you write that 7.3 petabytes in 4 years, well, you've gotten the life out of that drive. Now, we do have applications in our drive that if you want to say that I want to make sure I'm going to hold on to 5 years of life, we have throttling capabilities in the drive that you can enable that then allow you to slow the writes down to manage it to a 5-year application. But for the most part, most of our customers have not turned that on because they would rather have the performance and they don't want to see the variation in performance from that write amplitude style. So they're quite happy with the ability to, if you're going to write the drive out, to do so. But at this point so far, we haven't seen that. And that's why we're starting to see more MLC applications coming into the enterprise market.
All right, so Mitch, that was our last question. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today, and also like to thank Mitchell for presenting for us. As a reminder, when you close your browser, a short survey will pop up. If you could take a minute to complete it, we'd greatly appreciate it. And also, the winner of the iPad will be announced in the thank you email sent out tomorrow. So look for that, and maybe you could be the lucky winner. Thanks again, and have a great day.